Sulis is one of the very ancient English goddesses. From the evidence found, we know that she was worshipped at the hot springs in Bath, going back to at least the Mesolithic period. Sadly, there are no myths or legends about her, and ancient Britons did not write anything down. What we know about her can only be deduced from the archaeological finds at the Roman baths in Bath in Somerset, and a few mentions in ancient Roman documents. What we do know is that she must have been extremely powerful, and her presence continues to carry that energy forward. The best place to start our journey is at the Roman baths in the beautiful city of Bath in Somerset, England. The reason for starting here is that this is the hub of our story. Evidence or mention of the goddess Sulis has only ever been found in Bath. Today, a wonderful sand-coloured stone set of buildings stands over the natural hot springs that emerge from beneath the ground. They were put in place by the Romans, who loved a good hot spa to bathe in, but archaeological evidence tells us that the goddess Sulis was worshipped at this place long before the Romans arrived. Before the Romans, the site would have just been a natural spring set in nature. We believe ancient Britons would have worshipped outside in nature. They would have not had buildings or temples. Once the Romans discovered the natural hot springs and that the locals worshipped the goddess Sulis there, they adopted her as their own, although they aligned her with one of their Roman goddesses, Minerva. But let's go back to the early Mesolithic period, when the hot springs were part of the natural landscape. 494 stone tools have been found at the springs, dating to that period in time. This was the time of hunter-gatherers, pre-farming and just beginning to colonize Britain. The hot springs must have been a surprising find for them. They would probably not ever had experienced anything like it before. The steam and heat from the waters, the slight metallic smell, and the orange and green algae that grow around the hot waters would have seemed very magical. Then the sight of 3 pools of hot water bubbling and steaming away. We do not know much, if anything, about the spiritual beliefs of Mesolithic man, but I suspect they were either fearful or in awe of this phenomenon, or perhaps a little of both. More archaeological finds show that this spot was visited regularly in the period afterwards, up to 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, when farmers settled in the surrounding areas. The springs, it seems, were left pretty much alone. Perhaps people feared them, or they may have been treated as a sacred site that only a dedicated priest was allowed to visit. Roll on the early 1st century CE and a causeway of gravel and mud was placed into the main spring pool. This would have allowed people to walk out into the center of the main pool. This may have served as an entryway where they could then make offerings into the waters. A lot of the offerings seem to have been in the form of coins. A few remnants of pre-Roman pottery have also been recovered close to the springs, but no one built on the area of the springs until the Romans. The Romans created a spa in Bath, building on top of the natural springs and adopting the local goddess Sulis, and the town grew up around it. The Romans called the town Aquae Sulis, or Waters of Sulis. When you visit the Roman baths, if you are seeking Sulis, the first thing that strikes you is the sculptured pediment of her temple, built within the grounds of the Roman baths. North of the sacred spring was a temple dedicated to Sulis. Not much of it remains now, other than pieces of the pediment and stone of the flooring and bits of the altar, but you get a real sense of her there. It is described as a great classical temple with a portico of 4 high columns above its courtyard. The columns sat on a podium approached by a flight of full-width stone steps and supported a pediment filled with sculpture. Today, you can sit at the top of a set of modern stairs and look directly at the pieced together pediment of the temple. They have placed the broken pieces together and filled the rest with imagery. However, the main focus is the centerpiece, which was originally known as the Gorgon. It was initially thought to be the image of a snake-headed Gorgon, but on much closer inspection, the face is surrounded by hair and a beard rather than snakes, although it could be wearing a snake-headed torque around the neck. Some believe the face could be the solar god Belenus. Inside the temple would have been a statue of the goddess Sulis Minerva. Also included would have been an altar in front of her statue for her to look down upon. A number of items have been unearthed that were presumably given as offerings to the goddess into the hot waters of the spring. Coins seem to have been the favourite, with nearly 13,000 having been recovered, ranging from small denominations up to very expensive gold coins. Was the offering of a few pieces of small change a reflection of the size of the request? If you were asking a great deal of the goddess, would you have given her a more expensive offering? It is the curses that seem to be mentioned the most when referring to the offerings for Sulis. 130 have been recovered, written with a metal nib or point, generally on a small piece of pewter or lead, then rolled or folded and consigned to the waters. Most of them were seeking vengeance on someone who had wronged them, and they were even given lists of possible suspects. A lot of them seem to be about personal items, such as the theft of a towel. The cursed tablets found in the spring at Bath, also known as Defixiones, range in the date from the 2nd to the late 4th century AD. Sending or requesting curses from the divine was a common practice for our ancestors and can be found in many cultures. It shows the belief or perhaps the superstition that the divine could not only answer your prayers for positive requests, but also listen and bring down fury upon those who had wronged you. The language used on the cursed tablets varies with Roman capital letters, Old Roman cursive, New Roman cursive, and one tablet that has both Old and New Roman cursive letters. One of the tablets has been written in a language that no one can identify. Some suggest it is ancient Brythonic, others that is just marks given to look like writing. There are experts who suggest the text on the cursed tablets included magical words and symbols, some even being written back to front. The idea has also been put forward that cursed tablets may have been nailed to the temple wall, where they could be seen by everyone. Others were folded or rolled and sent into the waters so that only the goddess could read it. More than half of the names on the cursed tablets are Celtic, the rest are Roman. What needs to be remembered with these tablets is that most of them are very badly written, with spelling and grammar mistakes throughout. This does not help when it comes to translating them and making sense of the writing. Experts suggest most of them were written by those lower in society who would not have had much schooling. Even those who were well educated may not have been given proper instruction in spelling or grammar. That would make sense in the case of the unreadable cursed tablet that just has marks on it in an unrecognizable language. Was this person illiterate but still wanted to write a request to the goddess? There is a debate about what the name Sulis translates to. The Proto-Celtic translation of the word Suli does seem to mean sun. In Gaelic, Suli means an eye, an opening or an orifice. Other suggestions lead towards the name meaning eye gap, vision or well. In Gaelic, the word Sulith translates as sharp-sighted and knowing. These could relate to the solar energy at the springs and perhaps even the idea that Sulis was all-seeing. In Welsh and Old Irish, the word Suli or Sulis means eye, gap or orifice. The Latin name given to the site, Aquae Sulis, breaks down to mean the waters of Sulis. The suggestion is that it translates completely to mean the waters of the gap, or the waters of the goddess of the gap. Sulis, the solar goddess, protector of the healing waters, and judge and jury for those who were wronged. The solar energy obviously brings the characteristics that we associate with the element of fire, and the all-seeing perhaps leads her to help with divination and seership. Perhaps her rule over curses and the heat of the water from underground also gives her a link to the underworld. Part of the problem with the Roman baths is the inability to do any further serious archaeological work. Although today we see a lovely stone building that surrounds the main bath, a huge amount of the remains are under the ground. And that ground is covered by a cathedral and surrounding shops and buildings. Not so easy to dismantle a cathedral just to be able to dig up a temple. However, work does continue in as much as they can. New discoveries are often made to help us understand the story of the baths. The other point to note is that most of the work has been done to unearth and study the baths themselves. Any delving into the goddess has been sidelined somewhat. Of course, the question is, how much more information could we find on her? There do not appear to be any local myths or legends about her. No stories were told on the fire on late winter nights about her escapades. Perhaps that is part of what draws people to her. The mystery and the unknown, and the knowledge that a journey with her is very personal. Yours will be too. If you want to learn more about the solar goddess Sulis, then please take a look at our book, Sulis by Rachel Patterson, who also provided the words to this video. Is this Sulis? Yeah, it is. Sulis is one of the very ancient English goddesses. From evidence found, we know that she was worshipped at the hot springs in Bath in the UK, going back to at least the Mesolithic period. What we know about her can only be gleaned from the archaeological finds at the Roman baths in Bath and a few mentions in ancient Roman documents. What we do know is that she must have been extremely powerful, and her presence continues to carry that energy forward. Drawing upon personal experience, this book gives you an introduction to connect with Sulis yourself and discover and create your own relationship with her. Let Rachel introduce you to the solar goddess of the hot spring waters. It's available from Moon Books Publishing. Thank you so much for watching. Special thank you to our members. You too can become a member and gain weeks early access to these videos. Just hit the join button for more information. Subscribe for weekly videos or ring the bell for notifications, and we will see you next time.